Yellowstone National Park, one of the most renowned national parks in the world, due to its vast wildlife, robust ecosystems, and ever-changing terrain, and a multitude of places to camp and enjoy the outdoors. However, Yellowstone holds a much darker secret that we're going to look into. Tonight, I present you with 6 different eyewitness stories submitted by previous and current park rangers of Yellowstone. Are their stories merely works of fiction, or is there truly a conspiracy to hide the darkness enshrouding this popular park? You decide. In 1981, I was working as a Yellowstone park ranger. I was assigned to the Mammoth area of the park, which is located in northwest Wyoming. The area is very remote, and there are no roads leading into it. It's only accessible at the time by helicopter or horseback, so it's very hard to get help if you need it out there. I had been working in that area for about 2 years when I began hearing stories from some of my coworkers about strange things going on at night around some of the backcountry campsites, specifically near Lake Village, which is located near Mammoth Hot Springs and west of Norris Geyser Basin, also known as the hottest geothermal basin in Yellowstone. One of my coworkers told me that he had been out on patrol one night and was riding through the backcountry when he came across a campsite where there were 2 people apparently looked like they were sleeping in their tent, and as he approached, the tent flapped open and a woman popped out and looked at him for a few seconds, then quickly ducking back into the tent. Now, he said she didn't say anything to him or make any noise. She just stared at him with wide, blackened eyes from inside her tent and began muttering something in a language he had never heard. He said he was so freaked out by this because he's convinced that she wasn't entirely human, as he put it. He could not explain it and understood that it sounded ridiculous, but he said there was just something really off about the whole thing, and his insides were screaming in the pit of his gut that he needed to leave now. He even mentioned how there were these strange wooden hex-like trinkets, as he called them, hung up all around the makeshift campsite, and that the odor of rotting meat was so strong. She was not supposed to be out there, but he was so spooked by this experience, he had just decided to leave and head back to Lake Village as fast as he could. After hearing that story, I began taking a closer look at the area around the campsites in the backcountry, and even noticing several more of these strange wooden trinkets hanging up on the trees in some of these sites. Some of them looked like they were made out of tree bark and had strange symbolism carved into them. It kind of reminded me of what you'd see in modern-day Blair Witch Project. I didn't know what these things were, but thought it was odd that people were hanging them up in the trees in the middle of nowhere. And on one night, a few of us heard some very loud and disturbing noises out in the woods near one of our campsites. It sounded like there was a group of people screaming and shouting and lots of commotion all at once. But then there were also sounds underneath it, like animals howling and more commotion. And I could tell that the horses were becoming frightened by this, so we grabbed our rifles and we all loaded up and left the area as fast as we could to go investigate. We would later come back to that site with a group of rangers and thoroughly investigate what had happened. We had found a large number of footprints near one of our camps where we had heard these noises, and we saw everything from various bare feet prints intermixed with animal prints. Upon closer inspection, the tracks appeared to be canine in nature and large. This could only mean one thing: wolves. But this was 1981, so remember that wolves were not reintroduced into Yellowstone until the mid-1990s. Even more bizarre, these tracks were in sets of 2, or bipedal, and they also appeared to walk parallel with the bare human feet tracks that we found. None of us knew how to really explain what we found that night, and no other signs of anybody being there. I mean, there were no fire pits, no tents, no nothing. We found more strange wooden trinkets that gave us this unsettling energy, as a few of us had put it. Now, going into 1982 is when we began to notice a substantial increase in bizarre, unexplained activity. I myself can only attribute this to occult activity and satanic rituals. There were other encounters reported by my various colleagues. More strange noises that could not be explained, more trinkets and occult symbolism found in the backcountry. Even possessed horses that would attack their riders, campers getting up in the middle of the night and vanishing without a trace. There was even a group of visitors during this time who were staying at Lake Village that reported waking up in the middle of the night to a strange, unearthly voice coming from near their tents. This was just some of what we were experiencing at the time. The voice appeared to be calling them out of their tents and attempting to lure campers deeper into the wilderness. What's most chilling about this is the voice was different to all the campers we spoke to at the time. I remember it. Some reported it sounding like a deceased relative, while others described the voice as familiar, but couldn't tell us much more about it. One particular event I remember happened to me and 2 other rangers when we went out during the spring of 1982. In the backcountry, we were going to check on a campsite where we had been having problems with before. We were traveling by horseback and came across one of the strange wooden trinkets hanging from a tree out in the middle of nowhere. As we were going through this area, we all of us, felt something strange, like we were being watched. I thought it was just my imagination until the others began to speak up. When we finally had arrived at the campsite, we found one of the missing campers tied up to a tree in the center of the site. He appeared to be alive but looked like he had been severely beaten, naked, and was in a trance-like state, mumbling something in a foreign language that sounded ancient and had the look of someone who was possessed. We untied him from the tree, but he did not appear to speak English, so we brought him back to Lake Village with us, and after asking around, we found out his name was Kame, and he was from Russia. He told us that he didn't know how he had gotten there or what happened to him. In fact, he has no idea even coming into Yellowstone. He would later disappear from the area a few days later, and we never saw or heard from him again. And I've thought about Kame often over the years and wonder if he was part of this bizarre activity that we were not only seeing, but experiencing. What was he doing out in the backcountry of Yellowstone, and what happened to him after that night? He was hardly ever reported missing, so I have no idea what became of him. But I often wonder that if we had not found him at that campsite, would he have wound up like some of the other campers who vanished? We obviously have no answer for that, but I would like to think. One of my coworkers was also attacked by one of his horses who became possessed, as he described, and ended up in the hospital after he was thrown from it. He claims that while he was riding back to Lake Village, the horse's eyes turned black, and it began to head in the opposite direction than where he was trying to get it to go. After fighting with this apparently now possessed animal, he said his hand was jolted really hard and thrown off the horse, where it trampled him. He said that the reins would eventually wrap around him, and he was violently thrown onto the ground, and then galloped off toward the Lake Village at full speed after trampling him. And this was the same day he had come into a large clearing, and they had found these strange hex symbols, as he described, carved into the ground, almost looking like they were burned, and kept hearing this weird electrical buzzing on and off that reminded him of heavy machinery. Obviously, there was none because they're in the middle of the wilderness, but still incredibly eerie, and now that I look back on all of it, and the time. He actually broke several bones being thrown down and trampled on, but luckily, he survived. He even described how the horse's demeanor instantaneously changed. The horse perished a few days later under mysterious circumstances. These are just a handful of things I can remember off the top of my head after serving there. These events would take place for years to come and intensify going into the later 80s. One of my good friends who also worked alongside me had actually dealt with these occult activities face to face. He passed in 2009 from cancer. God rest his soul. His stories were pretty terrifying. He told me of how he could see entities that were in the form of wolves and cloaked creatures, as he put it, just blazing ghost-like through the woods at night. He said everything would be illuminated as if there was a full moon out, and while they moved around and disappeared, it would go dark again. He would tell me that the dogs of the pack that he had would begin barking and howl angrily, like they were being commanded by one of these things, and one night, his own dog was trying to run in a different direction than he was following. Later on, he said his dog began looking closely at the tree line as if watching something intently and starting to act funny. His dog had been around bears and mountain lion, etc., and never acted this way before. I have so many more stories to share with you. As always, we'll be in touch. I was a ranger in Yellowstone for about 18 years now. I had retired and moved to the Pacific Northwest in 2016, but I still visit Yellowstone often and remain friends with many of my former colleagues. This encounter happened during the fall of 2008 near Canyon Village on the north side of the Grand Canyon of Yellowstone, right off the Grand Loop Road, Route 89. It was nighttime, around 8 p.m., when my wife noticed something unusual while driving our car down Highway 89 heading towards West Thumb Geyser Basin, also located near Canyon Village. The area between Roosevelt Arch and West Thumb Geyser is very remote at night, with only 2 gas stations for light along the Grand Loop Road, one at each end, approximately 10 miles apart from each other. In addition, there are also small clusters of campgrounds. Anyway, as we're driving through the north entrance gate into Yellowstone National Park, we both saw a beige-colored 4-legged animal running alongside our vehicle next to an empty trailer hitch on the back of a blue pickup in front of us. The animal was keeping pace with our vehicle and ran like a dog or a coyote, but it was much larger than either one. I would estimate that it was at least the size of a German Shepherd, at least, but it had a long snout, more like a coyote, and its fur also looked different than either a dog or a coyote's. From what we could see in the darkness, the creature's fur appeared to be coarse like that of a wolf. The most unusual thing about this animal is that it appeared to be running on its hind legs only, sort of like how a human would run, interchanging between 4 and 2 legs. It didn't seem to be using its front legs at all, at least for part of the time. It would also change, and it was running at a loping gait, like wolves do when they run. Its front hind legs were longer than most quadrupeds would be, and we're both wondering why we had not seen this animal before, since it was so large, and we do travel through the area frequently. We never saw anything like it again after that night. Also, since I am an avid hunter of big game animals, I know what every animal in Yellowstone looks like, especially the 4-legged mammals and some birds. This creature wasn't any of those things. I don't know what this creature was, but whatever it may have been, my wife and I both agree that what we saw, a canine or wolf-like bipedal animal running alongside Highway 89 near Canyon Village during the fall of 2008. The fact that it could interchange between 4 legs and 2 legs at its own whim is impressive and terrifying. And I think what disturbs me most about the story is that whatever animal we saw that evening clearly was not a natural inhabitant of Yellowstone National Park. Also, my father shared an interesting experience that coincides with what happened to me. He used to work as a park ranger in the early 1970s at Canyon Village in Yellowstone National Park, and one night, while working in the night shift, he saw a very large bipedal animal cross the road in front of his patrol car that he simply could not identify. He described it as being similar to a human, but much larger and covered in black, shiny fur. This occurred in the same general area where I had my encounter. My father retired several years ago and moved to Florida. For a time, he did live in Cody, Wyoming, near the Yellowstone National Park, and I've been thinking about sharing my experience with him and asking him if he remembers seeing anything similar during his time as a ranger. The other odd thing is the year 2008 was also a strange year for Bigfoot sightings all across Idaho, especially in places like West Idaho. There were also some unusual anomalies witnessed by my paranormal activist friends during the same time period. They say that it coincides with the 2008 crash. I don't know what to make of it. Whatever we saw that evening anyway, was it any kind of known animal from Yellowstone National Park or anywhere else for that matter? That's all there is to it. Thanks for listening, and I think this animal belongs in its own category. It was 1997, and I was working in the Yellowstone National Park in the Forest Service. It was my first season there, and I was really excited to be spending the summer in one of the most beautiful places on Earth. I was also very excited to be working in a place that was known for its history of sightings of the supernatural, because as you know, Yellowstone is a hotbed for all things strange and mysterious. As a child, I had always held a deep fascination for stories of ghosts and otherworldly creatures, and at one point or another, was really hoping I would get to see something paranormal during my time working in Yellowstone. So one night, I was on duty at the ranger station. It was a quiet night, and there wasn't much to do. I was sitting at my desk, going through my paperwork, when I heard a noise just outside. It sounded like something really heavy was moving around in the bushes. Curiosity got to me. I got up to go investigate, and as I approached the bushes, I could hear the noises getting louder and more distinctive, sounding like either someone or something was breathing very heavily, but This something or someone was so deep in their voice, it sounded like they were a heavy smoker. I began to get scared, and I tried to stay calm to go see what was going on. And suddenly, out of the bushes comes this large, furry thing that was much taller than me. It had a huge head and appeared to have these sharp teeth. I was terrified and I could not move. This thing just stood there and stared at me, and its eyes, almost having this dreamlike quality to them, glowing red. And then it slowly began to move towards me. I quickly reacted, pulling up my firearm, and this thing seemed to look down and notice what I had done. And it's almost like it realized what I was doing because it very quickly changed its entire demeanor. It contorted its body in a strange way and almost crouched down and rolled sideways in a fast motion into the thicket beside me. At least, that's the best way I can make out what it did. And then I hear it running full speed off, crashing through the trees, letting out this horrible scream that I'd never heard before. It was terrible. And this is all that happened in the course of probably 10 seconds, but it felt so much longer. I was in shock and I didn't know what to do. On one end, I was terrified to even breathe, and on the other end, I knew who could I possibly tell. So I radioed for backup, and I told them that I simply had seen a bear and that it had tried to attack me. I was scared and I couldn't believe what had just happened. I tried to rationalize it and tell myself that it was just a bear, but I knew deep down that it was not. I knew that what I had seen was something much more evil, something that I could not explain. Even now, I still can't recall exactly how to describe the feelings it gave me. I still think about that night sometimes, and it terrifies me still. I'm not sure what I saw, but I know that it was something supernatural, something that I never want to see again. I actually did my best to forget about that experience for a long time, until I befriended a guy I worked with temporarily who claimed to know a lot about Bigfoot. I never entertained the idea, but we began talking one day and I shared my experience with him in a very vulnerable state and explained in detail what this thing looked like. He's pretty certain I encountered a gugway. It was hideous looking and was enormous. I was sure I was going to be killed. That's when he explained to me that they are known to inhabit the area surrounding Yellowstone and that they are usually very reclusive. He said that they are known to be very aggressive if they feel threatened and will often attack humans and eat them. I was so happy to have survived, but it still haunts me to this day. Anyway, as someone who had worked in the forest industry in Yellowstone, I'd had my fair share of encounters with the supernatural. Anyway, and that one does stand out to me. I've seen other strange things like apparitions and shapes in the dark, but nothing compares to what happened that night. Anyway, let me know if you need anything. Thank you for all the hard work you do. Born and raised in North Dakota, but have lived in Montana for the past 10 years now. I had been working as a park ranger in Yellowstone for the past 8 years at this point. In September of 1999, my partner and I were patrolling an area called Hayden Valley, along with a couple other rangers. We're all a part of the same unit. Hayden Valley is actually fairly central to most attractions within Yellowstone National Park, and we weren't doing anything out of the usual that night. We just drove around, looking for any signs of people who might be up to no good. It was about 11 p.m. when we began our drive through Hayden Valley, so it was pretty dark outside. We both had our high-powered flashlights, which illuminated about 50 feet ahead of us at the time, since there were no streetlights out here in rural areas like this. And suddenly, my partner next to me exclaims, "What is that?" and immediately turns to look in the direction was shining his flashlight. And then I see it. What we both saw, I'll describe it as best I can. It appeared to be this large, winged creature that looked vaguely reptilian. It was hard to say how big it was because it was so far away, but it had to have been at least 10 feet from head to tail, and its wingspan appeared to be even larger. The creature, which we were in disbelief at seeing, by the way, was gliding through the air slowly, almost as if it was stalking prey. We watched it for a few seconds in shock before it suddenly took off, flying at an incredible speed into the darkness. We were shocked and disturbed, all silent for a few seconds, just trying to make sense of what we saw, and I asked everybody if they had seen what I had seen. We all corroborated our details that we saw the same thing. We all agreed that the best thing to do in this situation was to keep driving so that we did not stumble upon whatever that thing was, in hopes that it was not hunting. After driving through Hidden Valley for about another 15 minutes, my other partner noticed something in his rearview mirror, which appeared to be these flickering lights on an extremely large vehicle. We stopped the car immediately, and I turned around in my seat, looking out the back window. However, all we could see was a sea of pitch black behind us, with no sign or sound of any other vehicles being present on the road at this hour. My partner then told me, "It's right behind us," and as anxiety began raising rapidly, after seeing that winged thing earlier, the anxiety never went down, but suddenly, it appears that whatever was following us, which there was definitely something following us, had disappeared into thin air. We all get out of the car, flashlights in hand, looking around for anything, but saw nothing, and the feelings of being followed and watched persisted. Now, a few weeks after this incident, after we all had agreed to keep quiet and to not tell anybody for fear of complete ridicule, I actually told one of my good friends about what had happened, and he has also worked in the Forest Service. He told me that he had actually seen the same thing I had seen, flying overhead while hiking with his girlfriend just a few months prior. His description of it was like a giant bat with long, sharp claws, and needless to say, I was not surprised to hear that somebody else had seen the same thing because Hidden Valley, after all, is very large, and there have been numerous sightings of unidentified flying objects in and around Yellowstone National Park. After all, UFOs do make up a history of a lot of national parks anyway. To be frank with you, I have no idea what that creature was that my partners and I saw flying through Hidden Valley on that September night 10 years ago. But whatever it was definitely not anything I'd ever seen before. And trust me, I've seen a lot of crazy stuff in my 8 years of working. My best guess is that it was some kind of unknown species of large bat. But whatever it was definitely one of the most bizarre and unexplainable things I've ever witnessed. As I'm writing this, it is currently December of 2009. I hope all who read this post have a wonderful new year and that their 2010 is as eventful as ever. I've been working here in Yellowstone for about 5 years now, and I absolutely love it. The scenery is breathtaking, the wildlife incredible, and the people are generally pretty friendly. But there is one thing that I have not told anybody about my job, the occult activity that goes on in the park. I'm not sure if it's because Yellowstone is built on top of what I believe to be an active volcano or what, but there seems to be a higher concentration of demonic activity here than anywhere else I've ever been. And trust me, I've seen some stuff in my line of work. In fact, one of the more memorable experiences I had was when I was called out to investigate a disturbance near one of the thermal springs. When I got up there, I found a group of people surrounding a large metal cylinder. It was roughly 6 feet tall and 3 feet in diameter, and was glowing with this eerie green light. I understand this sounds like something from a B-Sides X-Files episode, but it's what I have to tell you. The people around it were chanting and waving their arms around like crazy, most of them completely naked, and I immediately knew that this was some kind of satanic ritual. And I stepped in to try to stop it, and as I did, they turned feral on me. They were screaming and cursing, trying to jump on me and bite me and attack me. In fact, one of them even actually almost did, and fortunately, I was able to subdue this individual fairly easily, and calling for backup, I had assistance within minutes, and there were several of us on the scene able to handle the situation. It appeared that all of them were on a high dosage of LSD and were in the middle of having some sort of orgy ritual, to which I'm not sure. The cylinder was also taken in and apparently analyzed, but I was told that the military actually took over on that one, so I don't know anything about the cylinder, what it was, or why it was glowing, or what it was used for. But it appears that perhaps it could have been demonic in origin. That's just my speculation, of course, going by what I had experienced. And I can only imagine what would have happened if we had not stepped in. I don't know, and I don't want to know. I remember that we had some immediate personnel changes during that investigation. Within days, some of our staff just disappeared and we had new people. We were told not to question any changes and just do our job. Now I've seen other things too, things that I can't even begin to describe. But one thing that I do know is that Yellowstone is a hotbed for occult activity, and it's only getting worse. I don't claim to know what the future holds, but I do know that we need to be vigilant. We need to be on the lookout for anything and everything that seems out of place, because if we're not, who knows what might happen next. For the last 10 years, I've seen countless grizzly and black bears, wolves, bison, mountain lions, elk, and other wildlife in my career at Yellowstone. In fact, this week alone, I had the chance to see 2 different grizzlies up close, about 30 feet away, while hiking a trail with some friends of mine while also working here as rangers or interpretive staff, basically tour guides. They were both within Hayden Valley, but that's not necessarily important right now because what happened to me on Friday night was much more chilling than any bear sighting could ever be. I decided to stay late on Friday, clean up my patrol truck before it got too late to go into Canyon Village. This is where I work my patrol shifts and about once every 2 weeks throughout all 4 seasons. Anyway, so there's just this one spot along Dunraven Pass Road, which is located north of Canyon Village, where strange occurrences happen. For example, I was out with my partner when we came across what appeared to be a mutilated deer carcass, and there were weird symbols carved into the ground around it, and the deer's body had been cut open in a strange way. We had reported it to our supervisor, and they told us to keep an eye out for anything suspicious. After all, this was clearly the work of a person. A few weeks later, we were on patrol near the same spot on the pass and saw a group of about 20 people acting suspiciously. They had these weird glow-stick jewelry that they were hanging around their necks, arms, and legs, and they looked like some sort of cult or something. We decided to park our truck down the road from them, off in the woods where we could see them, but they could not see where we were. We were trying to keep ourselves out of view, and we watched for about 20 minutes as what I can only describe was a ceremony that took place right outside of Canyon Village. There was chanting going on, and they were carving these bizarre symbols with chalk on the ground, and all these people standing around doing strange things. I've never seen anything like this before or since until last night in September of 2014. And this is why I'm telling my story now, because what happened then scared me more than a grizzly bear ever could. So Friday night, after work, around 9 p.m., I go back out there on Dunraven Pass Road, where we initially found the mutilated deer carcass. This time there was another one. It was a bison. It appeared to have been decapitated, and the organs and meat had been ripped away from the body. And there were more symbols carved into the ground. We reported that to our supervisor, and they told us to increase our patrols in that area, but it didn't seem to stop anything. Things only would get stranger, because a few days later, while on patrol near Roosevelt Tower, we found an abandoned vehicle. It was a van and had been spray painted with all sorts of satanic symbols, and there was also a dead deer inside of it. The van had been completely gutted, and inside was a dead deer, with its body too cut open and gutted. We called our supervisor, and they told us to confiscate it and go back to the village, reporting it there. So we did that, and they told us to spend the rest of our shift patrolling in different areas of the park. I'm not going to say where because I don't want people out camping looking for these things. But the next night, I was back on patrol near Canyon Village. Now this time, something strange happened. It was now around 10 p.m., and this group of about 5 or 6 people came walking up from behind me, carrying those same strange glow sticks around their necks and arms and legs, and I watched as they gathered together beside one of the roadsides, right along one of the pull-offs, and they were all standing over by this one spot about 30 feet away from where I was parked. I had no idea if they could see me, but they did not seem to care, and I watched as all 5 or 6 of them took turns peering into this small hole in the ground as if they were trying to either put something in it or pull something out of it. And then all of a sudden, they all acted completely spooked and took off sprinting into the woods. Listen, I understand the stories and what I'm telling you is strange. It just seems like there's some kind of satanic cult that is targeting animals purposefully, and I'm scared they might come after people next. If you guys enjoyed this episode of Park Ranger Stories, be sure to go ahead and slap that like button, leave a comment down below. Was this video full of crap? Was it terrible? Did you enjoy it? What other forms of content would you like to see? I would love to read all of your comments, and if you're new to the channel, be sure to go ahead and hit the subscribe button and keep your notifications on so that way YouTube can let you know every time I release a great new piece of content. As always, guys, I will see you all in the very next episode.